is Reinhild Niebuhr. I'm the founder of the Young Africa Vision. Welcome to this episode of Young Africa Today. I can tell you that I was really looking forward to this episode with Devid Thomas, a young graduate, age 23, who has studied in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, at the Institute for Transport, and he studied transport finance. He's currently, like all of his fellow classmates, without work. This is a typical situation that we have in Africa. We have many highly intelligent, beautiful young graduates that simply cannot find work, and we cannot allow the situation to continue one day longer. So listen to this interview with Devid, and then I'll get back to you. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Welcome to Young Africa Today, Devid. I'm so excited to be interviewing our first candidate from Tanzania. So thank you very much for making time.
Thank you too.
I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourself, just starting to tell our viewers a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Reinhild. Yeah, my name is Devid Thomas. Devid. I'm from Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. I'm a graduate at the National Institute of Transport here in Tanzania. Yeah, I was pursuing the bachelor's of a degree in accounting and transport finance. By the way, by now I'm in internship. I'm just volunteering at the tuition center there at Sinza. I'm just teaching in business mathematics, business statistics, and accounting.
Very interesting.
Here I am now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Devid, I'm going to be very impolite. I'm going to ask you, how old are you? How old are you?
Oh, so sorry. 23 years old.
23. Okay.
23 years.
Okay, that's wonderful. I'm asking because I like working with young people in Africa who are between 18 and 24. So you are perfect in the age group.
Thank you.
I believe that you and your fellow youth in that age group have the potential to transform Africa to a beautiful place if we all work together. And so I'm very excited to have you on this show today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell me, how is life like for you? When did you finish your graduation? When did you get your degree?
For sure, life is too difficult. As you know that the issue for studying is very difficult. So I had a plan. I was planned to do better on my studies. Yeah. I thank God I have graduated my studies, and I'm so happy I'm going to score the GPA of 3.8 above. That is my thankful to God. Also, the issue for we as graduates in our country, we just faced some barriers in the issue for how we go to live the life after university. This is very difficult situation. It's very difficult moment to us about how we are going to live the life after university, the life that we don't have money, we don't have job. If you just look around in our street, there are some young people who are trying to conducting their business, but they end up to fail. So for sure, we're just scared about the life after completing our university. Most of young people here are trying to thinking about starting their business, but there are some barriers which are faced through this startup of business. Most of barrier that they face, it's all about fear of failure. Another one, it is lack of government support. Are we talking about lending policies to the financial institution, including that poor people like graduates. So most of we young people, we believe that we can start up a business by high amount of capital. So that end up to be a barrier to us. And another issue it is we fear from risk associated with entrepreneurship. Also, there are so many things that we fear to start up a business, we as young people in Tanzania. Thank you.
I hear you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that you are explaining the challenges facing you. You are living in a very, very different time to when I was graduating many years ago. And I think that even, 15 or 20 years ago, somebody who has graduated from a university or from a technical university like yourself was guaranteed a job. It was almost normal for people to get a job. But now for you, it seems as if it's very difficult to find a job. And this is exactly why I set up the whole Young Africa system, because I realized that what universities teach us is very theoretical, but it doesn't always help us with the skills that we need to be able to be successful in life. At the same time, we also are in a situation where the economy is changing, everything is shifting. So even big companies are struggling because of these changes, and they are also not as stable as they may have been a couple of decades ago. So all of us are together in this shift towards a new economy. Now, what I wanted to find out from you is, what are the kinds of businesses that you have thought about, or that your peers, your fellow students that are not finding work, what are the kinds of businesses that you have thought about that you would like to start maybe?
For myself, I'm not interested much in.
And he was gone. You can see the incredible sense of frustration of this young man who was really keen to talk to me, but in the moment of starting to talk about his business ideas and the thoughts that he and his peers have around the types of businesses that they want to start, either his cell phone battery went dead because he doesn't have enough electricity, or he ran out of data. Life for this young man is difficult, very difficult as it is for the other 200 million young people all across Africa that are sitting without work, that are unable to fulfill their human potential because of the circumstance in which they were born. I can tell you that when I was doing development work, well, really communication consulting work, traveling across Africa, I would see young people like David and others that weren't even as fortunate as him to get access to tertiary education, walking slowly, young people walking slowly. And this really touched my heart, because I have never walked slowly for a day in my life. Why? Why? And I asked the young people that I was working with, why are these young people walking so slowly? And they said, because they have nowhere to go. They don't know where to go. And this is the reason why I started Young Africa. This vision, the strategy, and why I dedicated my life to helping find ways of how we can create systems on a mass scale to help young people in Africa fulfill their God-given potential. Now, I started praying about this because I'm somebody who believes in God. I believe that God exists. I believe that He created each one of us for a purpose. And to see a young person, the pain of a young person not being able to fulfill their God-given potential because of structural poverty, not because of self-inflicted reasons. Yes, there's a fair number of young people that give up hope and that end up in a cycle of poverty as a result of self-inflicted poverty, but the large majority is not there. It certainly doesn't start there. The large majority of millions and millions and millions. I mean, have you ever thought of 200 million as a concept? How many millions are those? 200 million young people with bright brains, sparkly personalities like Devid Thomas, whom we saw just now, being frustrated because they just don't know how to take the next step. And they are looking for support from financial institutions, they are looking for support from government, and they are not receiving any. And this is where I really started praying, and I said, God, why on earth are you making all these young people across Africa, these children and young people, why are you letting them be born in a context where they have no support? What is it that you expect from them? And then I was listening to a man called Professor Mandi Bambarukuni, a Zimbabwean professor who is very much involved in the land issues and managing the land issues in countries that were colonized previously. Zimbabwe, of course, has a very particular situation and is struggling to deal with that situation. South Africa has a very particular situation. Zambia, Mozambique, all of these countries have very specific situations of what happened post-colonialism. Yes, it is important to understand the impact of colonialism, but really it is more about saying what now, what next, how do we do this? And I was running around with this question in my mind, this question that I had asked God, why are you creating so many young children and youth in Africa when they're going to have a life of hardship and a life of struggle? And this is when I listened to Professor Mandi Bambarukuni talking about the traditional leadership system in Africa, which is very often misunderstood by outsiders who observe it. But in the traditional leadership system, the person who was the leader, the leader of the tribe, or the leader of the large family, or the king would have a number of advisors close around him. And then if there was an issue facing the village, this is how Professor Rukuni explains it. If there was an issue facing the village, everybody in the village was called together. The men would sit one side, the women would sit one side, and the youth, also divided by boys and girls, would sit one side. Then a speaker would present the issue. In Shona, this concept is called padare. In Zulu or in some of the Nguni languages, it's known as an imbizo, or basically imbizo. Bizo means calling, so it's calling everyone together. And it's about saying, come and understand what's going on and let us hear, what are you thinking about this? And in this way, the chief or the king or the head of the family was able to listen to the input of everybody in his area of responsibility. Now, what happened is the speaker would expound the problem and explain it. Then, as a practice to make sure that each man had listened and heard it, and that the women there listening were also hearing it once more, and that the youth were listening. This was in essence the university training for the youth. They also had to listen to this problem statement being repeated by every single man in the sitting of the house. And each man had to repeat it in order to ensure that there was a common understanding of the issue at hand. So the first skill that was being developed was a listening skill. And then the second skill that was being developed was an understanding skill. Do you understand what the issue is? Then, after this process was gone, the hearing for the day was closed and a date for an ongoing session was set. And everybody went home. For somebody who doesn't understand what was going on there, this would have made no sense. Here's a problem. You've got to solve it. Why are you sending everyone home? You haven't got a solution yet. Everyone has just repeated the problem. But that was because there was no understanding of the process, no understanding of the Padara process, no understanding of the Mbizo process. So the next step that happened is that people went home. The father went home to his wife, to the mother. The children went home with their parents. Everybody had heard what is the issue. And the family was now talking in their own family household about this issue. Because at the next meeting, the man was going to have to feed back the solutions and the opinions of his family. And he was the spokesperson on behalf of the family. Did he have all the say? No, he did not. The woman or the women were responsible for the resources in the household. They knew what kind of resources the household has, and they knew what kind of resources could the household commit towards solving this shared and joint problem that was facing the community. Would it be a resource in terms of young men that had to go to war? Would it be a resource of young women having to participate in some agricultural activity together? Would it be a hunting trip? Who would go? Was there another kind of solution that needed to be addressed? Was there a water issue? There were different solutions for all these different problems. When the Mbizo was called again, everybody came back again because this was an inclusive, consultative decision-making process that helped to build consensus among the majority of the people in a village. And so where, from a Western point of view, often decisions are taken by the person in charge, the CEO or the MD or somebody, very quickly in order to address the problem, and that person carries the full responsibility of the decision. In African culture, the system of Mbizo, the system of Padare, is really an inclusive system where in the Western culture, maybe the solution wasn't the best solution. It was a solution and you had to move forward. And I understand and appreciate the value of that as well, because sometimes if you wait too long, the problem overwhelms you. But there is absolutely something to be said about the kind of problem solving that was happening in the traditional African leadership system. Because if you could build consensus, later on you didn't have rebels or people, lack of buy-in into the solution, because you got the buy-in up front. You got people involved up front. And so then when the next Mbizo was, or the next Padare happened, everybody would come together again, and now every single man would communicate what the family, and very much the voice of the women in that family, had agreed upon, should be communicated. So the man was acting as the communicator on behalf of the family. He was representing the knowledge and the opinions and the preferences and the willingness to participate in offering a solution of that particular household. And so every man would say that. In the meantime, all the elders were listening very carefully, and of course the chief presiding, or the head of the family, or the king presiding over the proceedings would also have an opportunity to listen to every single solution that was offered. More brain power put together. Nowadays, we can use the internet to speed up these communication processes, but we can still have these processes because we can have the input from a lot of people if we have one problem statement. And that is why I have started the Young Africa Today show. We need to design and develop a vision for a young Africa that looks at the reality of the problems that we are facing, of the challenges that we have, and the opportunities that are existing there, so that we can get feedback from all kinds of quarters, starting at the household level, starting at the family level, starting at the individual level, and then communicating that through on a platform that is going to be open for everyone to listen, and for the people that need to take the responsibility for the problem in solving it to work together and agree what is the best solution. So then, after all the men had spoken, of course this was taking another day or even sometimes longer, then everyone would go home again. No problem, decision made as yet. The next time when the Imbizo was called, the elders now had an opportunity to have spoken to one another, to have bounced off ideas with one another and with anyone else that they thought was saying something that is valid, and they would have come up with their own opinions and solutions on how to advise the head of the family or the chief or the king on what the best solution would be, or what possible solutions would be that could possibly work, discussing the pros and cons. So when the Imbizo was coming together, when the Padara was brought together, when it was everybody was called together again, now everyone was very curious to listen. What did the elders have to say? And so each one of the elders would stand up and they would present their understanding of both the problem and the possible solution that they felt had the most merit. And so every single elder would do that, and the total congregation would listen to this. Isn't that an amazing way of training the minds of young people to understand how analytical skills, understand problem-solving skills, learning from experience of the elders about how similar problems in the past had been addressed? Once the elders had done, everybody would go home again, and now it would be time for the king or the chief or the head of the family to consult with his closest advisors and to consider the input of everything, and to also understand what is the solution that would build the easiest consensus. What is the solution that would require the most leadership energy to implement, because it may be the best solution but not a very popular solution? And what were the internal political streams that had to be managed in this whole situation, and to get ready to build some support for the ultimate decision that the leader would build? Isn't that amazing? I thought that was incredible. And I was listening to Professor Mandivamba Rukuni talking about this, and I was thinking, wow, this is such a meaningful process. Yes, it takes time. But if you take a quick decision and afterwards have to deal with the fallout of that decision, that also takes time. That also takes energy. While if you are going through this process and you actually take the time needed to come to a solution that is the best solution, even if it doesn't have a lot of support, but at least you already know what are the arguments against it, so that you can formulate a solution, and that you can come up with ideas of how to best implement this, and before you even communicate the plan. And so when the Imbizo or the Padara was called again, the chief or the king or the head of the family would communicate what he had decided out of the input from everyone else, the way forward should be. And that was then implemented by everybody. This process was a highly respected process because it respected the input of everyone. Of course, there could still be rebellious voices saying, I don't agree with it. But everyone understood that a decision was necessary. It was important to have a decision, and that one had to go and put yourself behind, throw your weight behind that decision. And if it didn't work, then we could still go to plan B, plan C, plan D. But you had to make one decision, and the chief had to take the responsibility. The king had to take the responsibility for that one decision. But there was a lot more consensus and a lot more support for that decision than if the CEO or the MD had taken a decision up front and forced it through and tried to mobilize support for that decision afterwards. This is not so much a vision casting exercise. This is very much a problem solving exercise. I also believe there's a room for a vision casting. And what I'm doing here is casting vision. And I'm not even thinking of doing it on my own at all. I'm starting a process that I'm hoping that millions of people across Africa will start engaging with. And not just in Africa. Everyone who has an interest in doing business with Africa needs to be part of this conversation. Africa doesn't need your donations. Africa needs your investment. And you need Africa if you are outside of Africa, because Africa has the resources, both human resources and mineral and natural resources that the whole world needs. So let's work together of making this the African century. Let's work together of finding the best possible solutions. I'm just thinking of one simple aspect when it comes to all the millions of youth in Africa that I just want to throw in here because my brain sometimes bounces around. And that is, imagine if every new building we build in Africa is self-sustainable energy-wise from the word go. What will that do for the economies of scale for producing solutions that are fossil fuel free, that are sustainable solutions from the very beginning? Well, how will that bring down the cost of production? If you have these masses of new houses built for 200 million or 100 million young families or homes in a sustainable way, what will that mean for the economies of scale globally? Because the benefit of that will spill over globally. So let's get Africa's youth in a position where they can fulfill their potential. Anyway, back to the story with Professor Rukuni. So what happened next is that Professor Rukuni said, this is the normal process of when there was a challenge facing the village. If that problem or challenge was within the frame of reference of the existing experience of the adults in that village. However, if there was a brand new problem, a brand new issue that nobody had ever dealt with before, then the elders would call the youth and say, this problem is affecting your future. You have listened to our solutions, but now it's your time to think about what solutions can you offer. What innovations are in your mind looking at all the experience that we have given you, that we can tap into? This problem is your problem because it's your future that's affected. And you need to find a solution. And you need to come up with a solution. And then everybody would go home again. And now the youth would start communicating and thinking about what they would do. Of course, the brains would have started sparking throughout already. So they wouldn't need a lot of time to be able to have a platform to communicate their ideas and to build networks among one another and come up with ideas of how they could solve the problem. And so that was the process. And when Professor Mandivamba Rukuni mentioned that, it was as if the Holy Spirit had opened my mind. And I knew this is why God has created so many children and youth in Africa, because He wants transformation. God loves us, the people whom He has created. And He needs massive transformation. And wherever there has been massive transformation in history, God has had created massive numbers of young people, because young people are open for change. Their minds are open for innovation. And we have all the brains in Africa that we need, all the young brains in Africa that we need to solve the problems and turn them into opportunities for this continent of Africa. So we, the elders, need to create the platforms and provide the support and the experience. We need to provide the resources. We need to create the space and the opportunity for these young people to come up with the solutions of solving the problems that are facing Africa. And so I am looking forward to reconnecting with Devid Thomas, because I'm 100% sure that he's going to be innovative enough to find a way of getting his cell phone charged or getting his data or airtime paid for so that we can continue the conversation. So I'm really looking forward to part 2 of this interview. In the meantime, please start thinking and start praying. What can you do? What can you do to help these beautiful youth in Africa fulfill their potential? God has a plan and purpose for you too. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.